You guys are participating in something that's never been done at Healthy for Life before in 23 years, and that's a live presentation of Brian Peskin, who's been here many years, and also having people come back. So this is an experiment in whether or not we would, how many people would come, how many people are impacted by the fear that people have around this thing called COVID-19. So thank you for being here. And it's a little bit smaller group than we're used to having with Brian live, but that's good. It's always fun. Charles Darwin has been famously said that he survival of the fittest. And if you read Darwin, he didn't say survival of the fittest. He said survival of the adaptable. So those who can adapt the best and the easiest to circumstances beyond our control are the people that survive. And it's so thank you for being here. And without further ado, most of you, I assume, know Brian Peskin. I think Brian's become in 23 years, I think. So he's a familiar face, and he's helped hundreds, maybe thousands of people I know just in this area here. So thank you for coming. And Brian, thank you.
My pleasure. Having me. Appreciate you all coming out, given the heat. How many people heard me for the first time on Jeff's show today? So you've all heard me before. Very good. Okay, you haven't. Okay. I'm real concerned with people that have gotten the vaccine in that we may have an over response to different flus and viruses coming in. So this is probably one of the most important presentations I've ever given. But the way we'll start is there's two oils your body can't make. One's called omega-3, parent form. One's called omega-6, parent form. Why do I care about these two? Because there's other things your body can't make. Can't make essential proteins. But these two, if you look at every one of your cells, and we have 100 trillion, half of that membrane on the outside, the cell's a sphere. The inside's not real important. Everybody concentrates on the nucleus, la-di-da. Turns out the outside, the circumference of that circle, is much more important. Half is fat, half is protein. There's virtually no structural carbohydrate in a cell membrane. So anybody telling you live on a high-carb diet like rice and beans needs to get their head examined. It will make you fat. It will turn you diabetic. And here's the latest 2020 diabetes statistics from the government. 34 million diabetics. That's 1 in 10. 88 million pre-diabetic. Most of them don't know they have it. That is more than a third of America is either diabetic or on their way. Pre-1940, there was 0 type 2 diabetics. So I was one of the first people to say diabetes is a created disease unknowingly. 2 reasons: overdose on carbs, but not getting these oils in the cell membrane, because the membrane is where the hormones come in, and insulin is a hormone. So we have half that cell membrane is fat, the other half's protein. Of that half fat, quarter to a third are what I call parent essential oils. Body can't make either. So if they don't come in from food, you don't have them. These two, the parents, are the brick and mortar. Just like your house has the walls, the brick and mortar, that's the structure of the house. If the structure's no good, what happens? It falls down. If the cement is no good, it collapses. If the wood is rotting away, it collapses. Those are the parents. The parents allow what's called derivatives to be made. What's a derivative? GLA, DHA, EPA, DHA are what's in fish oil, right? Those are the, quote, active components. So what does a derivative do? It's technically termed an eicosanoid, but it regulates your immune system. So antibodies, T lymphocytes, T cells, interferon, they're all protein-based. So these things come into your body when you have a virus, bacteria, something that shouldn't be there, and it attacks it and kills it and gets rid of it so you don't hopefully get sick. The oils, those long-chain derivatives, are like the thermostat on your air conditioner. So you can have a multi-$1,000 air conditioning system for $3,000, $4,000, and what controls it? A little $50 thermostat. So if it's 72 degrees, perfect. But if that thermostat screws up and it gets to 20 degrees and you can't leave, you'll die. So the thermostat, in this case, the oils, those derivatives, control everything. And nobody talks about it. There's a field, but in regular medicine, most doctors don't understand this at all. They just think it's all protein, protein, protein. Now, what's the problem with the oils? Two things. With the parent omega-6, most of it is processed. Why is it processed? Because you can't have bagels and cereal smelling like fish that's gone bad, right? You go to the supermarket and you go to the fish aisle, a lot of times you'll smell something. That's the DHA oxidizing. That's why all the fish is kept on ice or it goes bad fast. Meat doesn't need that because it doesn't have those long chain derivatives. There's 5 and 6 double bonds. So actually fish oil goes rancid. It will go bad and work, cause problems. It's like rust on a piece of iron. That's rancidity at room temperature. Nobody says this. So anybody here taking fish oil, please stop. It's horrible. And actually it just came out. Doctor sent me this. They did a fish oil trial in May of 2021. It was published in JAMA, which is the #2 medical journal in America. They gave people 4 grams of fish oil and 4 grams of corn oil, and there was no difference in outcomes protecting against heart disease. Now, the corn oil is all processed. That's the omega-6 oil. It's processed. That's known to give you heart attacks. This was published in 1956 in the Lancet. So what that experiment actually showed was fish oil is the same level of poison as processed omega-6 corn oil is. Of course, they don't say that in the conclusions. They just said there was no difference. So fish oil fails all the time. So I hope none of you take it. It goes bad in your body and all your antioxidants come to that instead of helping where they should be. So the omega-6 is highly processed. I would say about half of it is ruined and non-functional. It's either adulterated or non-functional. Problem is it goes in that cell membrane. It sits there, but doesn't work. And there's a lot that happens in that cell membrane. The omega-3 side, nobody cooks with it. It's too reactive. Does anybody here fry with flax oil? No. Anybody fry with fish oil? No, of course not. You can't. It goes bad immediately with heat. So it's not used as that. But most people are lacking in the parent omega-3 because it's in very few foods. It's in grass, but nobody's eating grass. It's in lettuce, but people typically don't eat a lot of lettuce unless you're a raw foods vegan. And again, that's very few people. So the adulteration of the omega-6 is the #1 problem. The #2 problem is not enough of the parent omega-3. Now, what happens on the long chains when it goes to the derivatives? The first one, it's called the delta-6 desaturase, and that makes PGE1, just prostaglandin series 1. The big deal with that is the #1 control, like the thermostat in the air conditioning system of your body, of all of your infections, of your entire immune system. That's why it's PGE1, #1. Nobody typically talks about that. It's also a vasodilator, so it makes the arteries expand a little bit, so you get more blood flow. What do you get with more blood flow? More oxygen, more nutrients, in addition to regulating all the immune function. So if you don't have enough PGE1, you're in deep trouble. So you may think, I just have a lot of parent omega-6 because that's the top of the chain. Then it goes 1 notch down, gets me this PGE1. Not so simple. Most people have an impaired what's called delta-6 desaturase. I wrote a big white paper on that. It's one of the first ones. And there's about 9 diseases. Brian has a copy. I don't have it right here. But there's 9 diseases where it's impaired. What's the first disease? Diabetes. It's down by half. Cancer, it's down. Fatty liver disease, it's down. There's about 9 different syndromes. Any kind of skin conditions, it's down. So just taking more of the parent by itself doesn't solve that problem. You have to compensate. So there's a smart way to do it. If you take an oil that has what's called GLA in it, which, for example, evening primrose does, you will get bypass that delta-6 desaturase. So any supplement you get, you want to make sure there's something called GLA in it, in addition to the parent omega-6. Then you also need the parent omega-3, of course, but that's the biggest problem. That's at the top of the chain. So it's parent omega-6, the first delta to get PGE1, and then there's more down the way. So if this first, it's an enzyme, is deficient or impaired, you've also impaired the whole list down. And it turns out arachidonic acid is critical too, because that makes something called prostacyclin. Prostacyclin makes it where the blood platelets can't stick together and they can't stick to an artery wall. What's the one thing COVID is killing people? Heart disease. I don't know if you do it or not, but it is not a respiratory problem. COVID-19 is a cardiovascular problem. This was changed about 2 months after it was into it, because all the patients were starting to get blue, which is oxygen deficiency. It's called hypoxia. So I had a colleague actually call up New York and was talking to the doctors. They said, we don't understand this. It's like somebody came off of Mount Everest, boom, to the ground, and they have no oxygen in them. And of course, nobody listened. That's when they were all on ventilators and killing the people. Remember that in New York? They were killing them one after another. It took months before they finally figured, get them off the ventilator, because the ventilator would cause high pressure and do nothing. You didn't have the oxygenation capability. And the oxygenators are the parent omega-6. That's the biggest one. And that's in your whole arterial system. So the spike protein everybody hears about. Has everybody heard about the spike protein in coronavirus? Well, what that attacks is what's called epithelial tissue. And that's like your skin. And it turns out your skin coats everything, the organs, including the inside of the artery. It's 100% parent omega-6 called the intima. Now, if you're deficient in that, what happens? That spike thing goes right in and gets it. Now, the average ratios in the tissues in parent omega-6 to parent omega-3 are 4-to-1. So your heart needs 4 times more omega-6 than omega-3, your liver, almost everything except the brain and the eyes. They don't want derivatives. There's virtually no derivatives in the cell. Remember, the derivatives are the controllers. They're not in the cell. They're coming from the liver in different places, controlling things, but they're not necessarily in the tissue. Like there's no PGE1 in your skin. That has to come through the bloodstream. So if you don't have that dilation from PGE1, the omega-6 side, or prostacyclin from the same omega-6 side, you have a problem. The omega-3 series are very, very weak. Everybody only talks about omega-3, omega-3, omega-3. What they mean is the derivatives of omega-3, because they're not the parents and your body makes them. They make those derivatives in very, very small quantities. And this is the mistake medicine made. They thought all the parents turn into derivatives. They didn't understand the parents are the brick and mortar. They're the house. If that tissue doesn't have a strong cell membrane, it falls apart. How can I prove that? Look at Alzheimer's. Anybody heard of beta amyloid? That's on the outside of the brain in Alzheimer's victims. That's just spilled out protein. Your brain cells are basically just falling apart because they don't have the integrity. And the other thing is your brain has hundreds of millions of capillaries. That's where the nutrient transfer and the oxygen transfer takes place. Remember your high school days of biology. What are they made of? 100% parent omega-6. So anybody telling you something, you need to ask them, what is the metabolic pathway making what you say true? And they'll typically just look at you like you're nuts because they want to understand what you mean. That's the first question I ask. For example, fish oil makes my skin better. I take fish oil, I have smoother skin. My first question is how? There is no metabolic pathway to make skin better. It's absolutely impossible. It's not in the skin. There's nothing to control it. Your skin's all parent omega-6. Dermatologist sends me an email. He goes, I'll tell you how it works. Fish oil is acting like a long-term steroid. So if you have an excess immune system, you're getting too much, you have to dial it back. That's what PGE1 does too. Everybody says I need a stronger immune system, right? Everybody heard that, right? You don't need a stronger immune system. You need a properly functioning immune system. Because I like bringing the COVID example because it exemplifies all of this. The cytokine storm is an overreaction. It's like I go to a water fountain, push the button, what happens? Boom, water comes up, hits me in the face, and then it stays there. That's called an impulse response. That's what happens in your body when a foreign invader comes. It's like, boom, it comes out. But if it comes out too fast, like I said on the radio show, analogy would be you have home invaders, 2 of them. You call the police and they shoot them both in the leg with a revolver. Oh, you could say they shouldn't have shot them. That's neither here nor there. They stopped them, but they didn't hurt your building. As opposed to coming in with tanks and blowing up everything. They'll, of course, kill the 2 intruders, but they destroy the building. This is what happens when you have a cytokine storm. It should be coming out slowly and a little instead of boom. So it actually attacks the organ. So you need something to throttle down the immune system. If you have allergy, you have an excess response, not too little. You have an overshoot response. Like I used to have them horrible. I live in Houston. So I went to the allergy place. I said, oh, you're extremely sensitive to grass and pollen. Well, I was bedridden twice a year for like 3 days. I couldn't even think straight. That's all gone. That was before I knew this. That is all gone now because it throttles back that response. You go, wait a minute, maybe it'll be too little a response and I won't have any defense. No, that does not happen. Your body has a superb innate wisdom to make things perfectly done. How do you prove that? What's the biggest miracle in your body? Remember, you have 100 trillion cells. Every one of them stays the same size. If that just increased a zillionth of a percent times 100 trillion, your body would be expanding and contracting all the time, right? It stays completely constant, which is a miracle that that could even happen. So your body's ability to regulate is incredible. People don't give it enough. My joke is, no matter what we do wrongly or mistakenly, because the quote experts don't know what they're talking about, the reason we don't die right away is because your body's so good. And you may die 10, 20 years down the road. Many of you will if you don't do the right things, like taking fish oil. That will kill you. It is known. Article just came out with fish oil. I was never anti-fish oil. It was just, what is this fish oil stuff? I don't see how it's doing all this. And I read the science and go, it can, it can, it can. Fish oil is the #1 supplement in America. And it should be the parent oils it should be, but it's not. It's the wrong stuff. Fish oil is antifreeze for a fish. So if you have the wrong stuff in you, it also cuts down your cardiac enzymes in the mitochondria, which is energy to pump the heart. Fish oil, an article came out, it cuts that back by half. Well, that's called congestive heart failure. Any of you heard that term? Sure, a few of you have. A lot of people die from that. The heart just can't pump. You take fish oil, that's what you're having it do, because that stuff displaces the parent omega-6. If you have no energy, parent omega-6 is the problem there too. In your mitochondria, that's where the energy cycles are made. That is in the inside of the cell. That's not in the membrane. That is in the inside. You have hundreds of mitochondria in every cell. All those trillions of cells, you have hundreds of mitochondria in them. The inner lining is all parent omega-6. It's called cardiolipin. It's known. It never gets the credit it deserves to be. I've never read one article saying if you don't have fully functional parent omega-6 to go into this mitochondria, it's not going to work and you're going to be exhausted. What's the #1 complaint of Americans? You don't get enough sleep. That is absolute, utter nonsense. Everybody can get enough sleep. That's the one thing you can control 100%. Nobody's putting a gun to your head saying, you can't go to sleep at 9 o'clock. You're staying up till midnight or I'll shoot you. That's just irritates me when I see things like that. So just more sleep won't do it. That will not cure a nutritional deficiency. Sleep is great to recuperate everything because you're not eating, you're not running around, so your body saves energy, but it can't solve a nutritional deficiency. So the critical things, again, the parent oils, some GLA to bypass that delta 6 impairment that most people have. And we've come a long ways to making yourself very, very good. Now, an article just came out, stroke 2021, this year. Linoleic acid, that's a technical term for parent omega-6, in the cell membrane inversely correlates the prevalence of symptomatic carotid artery disease. So that's a stroke in the brain. That means your artery is clogged. Inverse proportion means the less I have, the worse the disease is. And the ones that had the most parent omega-6 in the bloodstream and also in the plaque, 7 to 9 times more strokes because they didn't have enough of the parent omega-6. I've not seen this article get any reference whatsoever. 2 came out with talking about COVID. The parent omega-6 oils dissolve the membrane. All coronaviruses are what's called lipid enveloped viruses, and there's actually 7 of them. There's SARS, there's MERS. COVID-19 is a SARS-CoV virus, and it just has to do with its structure. Bless you. This is called, the first one, inactivation of envelope viruses and killing of cells by fatty acids. These oils are technically termed fatty acids. So it's right here. They looked at this. Then in 2019, characteristic of a lipidomic profile of human coronavirus infected cells, implications for lipid metabolism remodeling upon coronavirus replication. And what this one said is, on that spike protein, there's 3 to 4 pockets where parent omega-6 is supposed to be. And if the virus hits it, it locks it or it can't do anything. But if you don't have fully functional parent omega-6, you don't get that. And that way it just raises havoc all over the place. But it's absolutely incredible. These kind of journal articles come out in the medical journals and nobody does anything with them. It's like, oh, that's nice. And what kind of cake do you like for dinner? You know, there's no level of, my goodness, this is earth shattering. Medicine's biggest problem is it's not what's not known. Everything is virtually known. No one connects the dots, especially in the field of lipids. And most of the pharmaceutical companies do not have scientists that specialize in physiologic lipids. Their idea of lipids is what's in the bloodstream, like cholesterol. It's not what does your body need and how's every cell membrane constructed. So they're in a straitjacket. Big pharma minimizes or impairs and impedes. Cholesterol reductase inhibitor, beta blocker. It's very easy to impede or block something. It's much harder to maximize something. So now I'm doing a lot with wound healing in diabetics, and that's what I really love, is because you have a diabetic foot ulcer. I don't know if you know what those are, but they're horrific. They're a hole in your foot, could be 2-3 inches across, leads to a lot of amputation. 6% of diabetics get those every year. So if any of you here are diabetic, you should be scared to death of an amputation could be in your future. It's horrible. So we're getting healing in unprecedented rates, 25 to 30% faster and a much better heal. Because if somebody has a wound that's open and won't heal, it's open because they can't feel their foot. So they're rubbing it. Even if you rub it, your skin should be pretty good. But no, they don't have the parent omega-6 in the foot. So the integrity is not there. The skin is too thin. It wears away. It starts going into the tissue. And this hole can get down into the bone. It looks like raw meat. It's horrible. They typically have cardiovascular problems too. So they're getting no blood flow, no nutrients. So it doesn't heal. So if we can help that, we can help anything. So I can prove these parent essential oils work along with some GLA for the derivatives. Those are very big. A fellow just died. Bernard Fisher is his name. Transformed breast cancer care. This was a top surgeon saying radical mastectomies were not effective. And he was the most hated surgeon in America because surgeons like to cut, and their idea was the more we rip out, the better. And he would say this isn't based on any science. And the time he spent with the science said, no, you don't take the breast off and the lymph nodes off and the muscle out. everything. That's called a radical mastectomy. They just rip out everything. Now it's much less invasive and they only take out a little bit. He would say even after the mastectomy, the cancer was still there. And that's what they found too. There were even some movie star was advocating for a prophylactic, meaning get it in advance, mastectomy, getting their breasts off because you have the BRCA gene. And this was absolutely disgusting, completely against this. And they came out and actually did studies and there was no decrease in the cancer being gone because it's systemic. It's not just in the tissue. So medicine, you can't rely on for the answer. It takes them decades to change their mistakes. They don't want to admit it. And after they admit it, no one ever says, we're sorry. My comment is, why aren't the people that said the wrong stuff in jail? There's nothing ever done. It's just new research shows. It's like the mask. I was shocked to hear you have a law that says you can't be forced to wear a mask outdoors or anything. Colleague just sent me, they analyzed masks after today, as a matter of fact. After 8 hours of wearing, there's about 30 inflammatory things in those masks from breathing out and having it concentrated, from pneumonia to all kinds of bacteria, serious things. So these poor kids and poor people wearing a mask, they wear the same mask multiple days. Horrible. They're also known to be completely ineffective. Who do you ask for this? You don't ask for a doctor, is this mask effective? You ask a physicist. What's the particle size of a virus? What's the particle size of the weave in this mask? And what's it do? The answer for a virus? Absolutely nothing. Fauci even said that in the beginning. He told the truth. And then later on, it's, oh, to let people feel good. Why does feeling good have anything to do with how healthy you are? And I'm making you sicker so you can, quote, feel good. That just disgusts me to no end. So the right oils are important. They're plant-based. Now, they are in foods. In the seed oils, I like a supplement because it's the easiest way to get it. You can make sure the ratios are right if the people designing it, but you need more parent omega-6 and parent omega-3. Has to be organic, has to be very low oxidation levels. You don't have a problem like fish that smells bad. If you get fish oil, it has something called penicillin, which is technically a secondary aldehyde, which is horrific for the body. It's at 19, toxic is at 20. So the most pristine fish oil is at a level typically of 19, and 20 is the cutoff. And they're allowed to do this. Plant-based oils probably going to be around 6. There are going to be some over time this happens, but 6 is no issue at all. It's nothing. An aldehyde means it can go long distance from where it goes into the tissue, and it creates havoc and even alter DNA. You're taking fish oil, I'm telling you, it is not a zero. It is a poison, and it's the #1 supplement in America. It doesn't matter what article comes out now with people saying it doesn't work. The doctors are still on board with it. I just had one person email me yesterday, taking 4 grams of fish oil a day. I said, it's going to kill you. He stopped taking it, and typically people within a week go, I can't believe the difference. Again, it acts like a long-term steroid. So this is why it will help skin short-term. If you have a problem, it does lower the inflammation short-term. But if you ask any MD, can I stay on a steroid for a couple of years, they'll look at you with horror. They know the damage it does. What it actually does is it shuts down all EFA metabolism. Remember I told you that first derivative goes from the parent to PGE1? It stops that. It stops all of it. Also, the omega-3 side goes to that same delta-6 desaturase. They both come in parallel through it. So they're both getting impaired. So if you take DHA or EPA, because I told you you're not getting enough parent omega-3, you will get more of the derivatives, EPA, DHA, and that could be a help for a month or two. But long-term, your body's going to go, what is this? I'm getting an overdose of this, and I'm not getting any of the parents. It knows it. There's feedback mechanisms. Even in the cell membrane, there was a paper that came out 2017 or 2018, talked about if you have adulterated omega-6 in the cell membrane, inflammation stays on all the time. It's called chronic inflammation. And inflammation is the cause of virtually every disease. How do you stop inflammation? Cellular oxygen. That comes from the parent omega-6 too. That's all Otto Warburg's work, and I stand on his shoulders with that. But that's what actually got me into the whole thing with lipids in the cell membrane. They are the oxygenate transfers. So oxygen comes in the blood through hemoglobin. You've all heard of hemoglobin, but it can also disassociate from the membrane itself and give you oxygen. That's why you need to be taking it every day to replace what it uses for itself. I've never seen a medical journal article except one. Dr. Campbell wrote about it, 1976. He was looking at cystic fibrosis in kids, and that was the end of it. It gets no reference. Like I said, there's virtually nothing that's not known, but there's nobody putting dots together. No, I've had 20 years to put the dots together. Don't think for a second it was, oh, we got all this. No, there were years where I don't understand this part here. And then all of a sudden, I'd either see the biochemistry or see a journal article, because there'd be no way to tell without having somebody do experiments. It filled in this piece. So now it's everything fits. I can virtually explain everything with a metabolic pathway. So those parent oils are absolutely critical. There's two more things most people need. One is a detoxifier, because if you're eating junk, there's a lot of bad chemicals in there now, right? There's toxic things that are cancer causing, that are all kinds of debilitating things that food processors put in. The best detoxifier, I call it a blood purifier, I've ever seen, is something called Esiac. That's been around for over 100 years. It's an herbal formulation. I'm not big on just herbal. That means nothing to me except it's plant-based, but plants can kill you too. You know, there's different substances you can get from plants that will kill you. These won't. They're non-stimulating, non-irritating. When I first saw this, started using it, I ran all the pharmacologicals on it. You could take almost a gallon a day with no issue whatsoever. And all you need is about a tablespoon or two. So it's next to nothing. That's daily. That was actually the first thing I got involved with, because my wife was diabetic and I wanted to minimize things in the blood, because what happens with a diabetic? Yeast. High blood sugar. What grows in sugar? Yeast. That's how you make bread, right? You throw flour, sugar, some yeast in there. Boom. It just grows like the dickens and it runs on sugar. So any women that have yeast infections, and a lot of you do, cut back the carbs, the herbal, that's gone. I mean, it just won't happen. Your body has no choice if you're overdosing on carbs. There's only 1 teaspoon of sugar in the bloodstream, by the way. 1. You have 5 quarts of blood, 1 teaspoon of sugar. The average American today is eating 100. Question I had when I first came across this in the textbook of medical physiology over at MD Anderson's medical library, Jesse Jones Library, where the heck's the other 99 go? Then you see insulin. Insulin's a fat storage hormone. Insulin is a response to sugar. Fat storage hormone. Gee, could that be why everybody in America has become fat and overweight? We were told high carbohydrate diet, right? For 20 years. Now, finally, people are going, hey, ketogenic diet, stop these darn carbs. Remember, I told you it takes 20 years before they get their head out of their tail? And then you still have people pushing back on that. But there's no metabolic pathway. Carbohydrates are not essential. There's no RDA for carbs, and there's none in the cell membrane. So your body can actually make them. You don't need many carbs at all. So last on the list. So the herbal Esiac, superb detoxifier to get rid of what you don't want. The last thing I tell everybody is you probably need minerals, because they're not in the soil anymore. They don't use organic fertilizers. So the way humans get minerals is they come in through the plant from the soil. The cow or animal eats the plant, gets incorporated into its meat. We eat it. You can eat all the spinach you want. You can't incorporate any of the iron. So Popeye was lying with the spinach. That's not where he got his muscles. They misled everybody. Again, nobody says, I'm sorry, I lied to you. You can't get it. It's tied to the fiber cellulose. We can't break that down. So fiber irritates also. The more you eat fiber, the higher the cancer rates. This was published in 1999 and 2000. What are they back now? Fiber, fiber, fiber. It irritates. It's sawdust. How gentle on your digestive system do you think sawdust is? It irritates it. So you don't want it. You don't need it. It's tragic. We keep getting misled. So the minerals are what's called coenzymes. They're like vitamins. So they make the vitamins work, and they can make reactions go up to 1,000,000 times faster. They're tied to energy. They're tied to everything. One of the things with COVID is the doctors did get right, zinc. Zinc is one of those minerals. But there's manganese, magnesium. There's other minerals too. There's about 8 of them that are essential. And what I did was when I started recommending things, I called up the best animal mineral company in the world, Albion Labs. Because I figured if they can keep the animals from getting sick, they have a winner. Because when an animal gets sick, you don't spend thousands on vet bills, you shoot it. So they can't get too sick or there'd be a big problem. So when I was saying the recommendations, I'd get back from the chief chemist pharmacist, who's actually a pharmacist, said, Brian, people want calcium. I said, but they don't need it. He goes, I know, but they want it. I said, my job isn't to give them what they want. My job is to give them what they need. Nobody needs to be taking calcium supplements. That's the last stage of an arterial plaque, by the way. It's called calcification of the plaque. So if you're taking calcium supplements, you're making that plaque calcified and putting yourself perfect for heart disease. It's horrible. Everything you supposedly know, in quotes, about nutrition is wrong. It's not based on science. It's about people that want to sell you something. But Brian, whatever you do, you're going to be selling something too. Number one, I don't sell anything. I consult and do science. Number two, so what? I have no problem with somebody selling something as long as it helps you. It's when you charge somebody and are killing them, I have a big problem with. So to recapitulate, 3 things. The oils, parent oils, more omega-6 and omega-3, has to be organic, can't be processed, has to have some GLA in it, so you bypass that impairment in the delta-6 desaturase, make sure the oxidation levels are good. Those are the 3 biggest things. Then minerals, because they're coenzymes, they're just not in the soil. So we're not going to get them. Organic, it doesn't put them in. It just means there's nothing bad in there. So there's how bad something is and how good something isn't. 2 different things. So I do life systems engineering. We make that distinction. Almost nobody else does. I don't hear anybody talking about it. Trans fats are a -20. Olive oil is a 0 because there's no parent essential oils in it to speak of. It's 7% parent omega-6, but that's not enough. And then there's a trans fat, which is a -20. And there's olive oil, which is a 0. And then there's the parent essential oils, which are a +20. So there's a spectrum on this. And that's it. Those are all the average person needs, along with just minimize the carbs, and that's it. You're going to be in real good shape. You have energy. You're going to have fully functional immune system that's not going to have these cytokine storms, that's not going to have these problems. People didn't die all the time in 1900 before vaccines and modern medicine, modern drugs were invented. The body could heal itself. And we have that innate system, except we're putting in the wrong fuel. It's like the Ferrari that doesn't run right. You check its timing, you check its spark plugs, you check this, you check that. All of that's okay, can't figure it out. Somebody put in the wrong fuel. They put diesel fuel in instead of super premium fuel. That's what we're doing. The system works great, which is us. God doesn't make mistakes. And no one ever thought these people would be so stupid. They're doing food processing and unknowingly killing themselves. Well, now you know why they're killing themselves. So that's enough for the general background. Probably have about 20 minutes for questions. I'll be happy to answer anything. And if I don't know, I'm obligated to tell you I don't know. I'm in a straitjacket. You have to have science, and I can't make up something. So I'm one of the few. If I don't know, I'll tell you. And don't be afraid when somebody says they don't know. You don't want people lying and making up an answer. That's the biggest problem we have today. Health professionals don't like to say, I don't know. You ask a question, you expect an answer. They're going to give you one, and it's typically going to be wrong. Tragic. Yeah.
There seems to be a statin craze amongst the medical community.
Yes.
What do you know about that?
Statins. What is a statin? It lowers cholesterol, okay? LDL cholesterol. First thing with this is what's cholesterol do? Well, number one, does about 10 things. Textbook of medical physiology. It's the most ubiquitous substance in your body. So the body either makes it or gets it from food. There's a feedback system, so it can tell. Biggest thing that got me was there's no cholesterol sensor in the bloodstream. Okay, big deal. Well, is there sensors for anything else? Yes, insulin, blood sugar. To 0.1%, 0.1%. Calcium sensor, potassium sensor. So if the body needed a sensor, there would be. Bottom line is cholesterol numbers are relevant. Medical professionals won't know this. Ask them what the cholesterol sensor number is. There isn't one. And if they don't know if there's not a cholesterol sensor, they don't know anything. Number two, what's it do? Cholesterol is here and it magnetizes the PEOs. So it pulls them along in the bloodstream. Everything just doesn't get dumped in your bloodstream. It has to be made soluble. So that's called a lipoprotein. It's like oil and water don't mix. I put some oil on top of water, it floats, right? Well, I have to have everything mixed in the bloodstream. So this is the way it does it. So here's it's technically called cholesterol molecule. That doesn't change. But what is called esterified, which just means magnetized to, you just get rid of the water. Medicine loves big technical terms, but they don't understand what half the terms really mean. They can tell you technically what they mean, but not what it implies. So it's just magnetized to the PEOs going along. Statins come by and get rid of some of this. Now, it's good because it's getting rid of the bad PEOs. Remember, I told you most of the parent omega-6 is processed, non-functional, so it gets rid of that. But at the same time, what's it do? It gets rid of the good stuff. So the answer is not that. It was a first try. I could say decent guess, but you could do better. How do you do better? Just get more of the functional stuff. And Dr. Lanz in 1990 showed in the cell, composition is proportional to what you're eating. Now, of course, there's genetic predisposition to different species on what should be in there, but you can vary. The number one thing that can vary in all cells is lipids. And these are called lipids. Oils, same thing, that's the category, lipids. That can vary. Much else, you can't vary too much, but lipids you can. So that's the answer. The statins don't work. There's what's called NNT, number needed to treat, meaning if I treat 100 people and I get one positive outcome, that NNT is 99, which stinks. The lower the NNT, the better. Insulin's NNT would be 1. Everybody I shoot insulin to, your blood sugar goes down. Everybody. So you want a very low NNT. The higher it is means the more people I have to treat to get any positive effect at all. That's a 99% failure rate. Does that sound good to you? In your job, could you be wrong 99% of the time? Of course not, you'd be fired. Every computer make 99 out of 100 blow up on turning it on. Hey, but I got one that works. That's the medical community. We got one. That's why we need 100 million people to be on statins. So we'll get 1% of them. You're still missing the point. It's 99% failure. My comment to everybody that asked me about this is they don't know about PEOs. Now we're going to be getting an actual Positron emission test scan of a patient that has very bad clogged arteries. So he's a doc, so he got a PET scan, which you never do. It's too much money. You typically get CT scans or angiograms. But this is a very, very precise measuring the cloggage. So in August, he's going to see what these oils do to reverse blockage. I said we're going to get a result. There's no drug that reverses blockage, by the way. At best, a statin slows the progression. There's a big difference between I reverse the darn thing and I slow you from being on your way to dying. Drug companies can't do it, but statins, horrible, and the doctors don't feel they don't have a choice. That's the best we got. So I pray I'm in the 1%. I've had doctors tell me that. They take the statin themselves. I just hope I'm in the 1% and get an effect. Good question.
Now, along the same lines in regard to statins, how would you, what do you do for a client that has ED dysfunction and
That's erectile dysfunction. That's a big problem today, huge problem today.
Anyhow, it's a very big problem. So you got testosterone issues coming in, but if you have someone's being recommended a statin, take that to possibly open up arteries to be able to have.
It's not going to do that.
Tell me what you think is going on with that, because.
Yeah, the biggest thing, remember, is blood flow. That's PG. That is a vasodilator, and prostacyclin, which is PGI2, from arachidonic acid. They're both from the parent omega-6. One goes here because it's so important, it gets shoved off. And the other one is the last one from arachidonic acid. You know, has multiple of these, what's called desaturase enzyme levels. So that's the first thing. They need more of the parent omega-6 with the GLA and, of course, omega-3 too. But it's a blood flow issue. And most of them have neuropathy too. That's why diabetes is a big problem with blood flow. They have cardiovascular problems. The oils and the herbal both help phenomenally. It's all blood flow. Nothing else. Statin won't help you do anything.
Not testosterone.
Delusional. You can do testosterone, but that's not going to do much for blood flow. I mean, it's a male hormone. It's going to give you muscles, but it's not going to do that much. Now, there's a lot of people, testosterone for everything. You know, that's the other big thing, human growth hormone for everything. My comment with that is you're not a baby anymore. What are you doing at 70 years old with human growth hormone? Because there's 20 other hormones that haven't gone up at the same time. Everything's a system. It's not you just do one thing and I'm all set. How does this, vary that, vary this? And if you're just single focused, you got a big problem. I'd be scared to death of overdosing on a hormone. But try the oils. 30 days, you should see a big difference with
Those are the whole system.
the liquid herbal. Oh yeah, systemic. Absolutely. More blood flow in the brain, more blood flow everywhere, including there. Good question. Yeah.
If you have diabetes or Alzheimer's, does it help to double up on it to start with?
It's an excellent question. Can I double up? Absolutely. That's what I tell people. You could take doublets, and the regular doses are like a half a teaspoon for a 160-pound person. It's very, very effective with these doses. I'm very conservative. So number one, I don't like seeing people waste their money. Number two, I don't like overdosing the system by anything more than a factor of, say, 8. Fish oil, you're overdosing the system by 20 to 500 times on a daily basis, by the way. With the dosages they're telling you, up to 500 times too much daily. Put that in perspective, take 500 aspirin, tell me how you feel in the morning. Don't do it, I'm being real facetious. It's called dead. You'll bleed to death.
So how long should you take the extra?
I would take 90 days and then see how you're feeling. You can get different imaging tests, non-invasive, and they can actually tell you. I remember when I was starting on this, I got echo tests, echocardiograms, sound, and people were just absolutely amazed. Me and my wife had no blockage at all when we had this done. And I don't know how old we were at the time, but there should have been something. And they both just stopped everybody. All the techs came over and stopped who they're working on. I've never seen this. What are you guys doing? And that's this. The liquid herbal is better. It can come in capsules too, but the liquid's at least 10, 15% more effective just because it's liquid and it hits all the tissues when you drink it. And it's just excellent. It's also only the water component, so it's really, really good. But good question. There's no overdosing on this. Double for the rest of your life. If you're a diabetic, if you have any kind of disease like cancer, you need more because that delta-6 pathway is impaired. And it's not going to go away. I can't reverse it. It stays impaired, but we compensate for the impairment, which is as good as you're going to get. So I'm real happy with this discovery. To my knowledge, nobody talks about it. It's like it doesn't exist. Never mind how to compensate. They don't even talk about it. It's just not talked about. Good question. One or two more? There's a couple books. If you're concerned about diabetes, 24-hour diet you need to read. If you want to dump some weight, that's the book you need to read. I did that for doctors because they wanted a book based on science, and I gave it to them. The other one is called PEO Solution. That's more health and disease. That tells you what these PEOs do and why. The references are there. Of course, if it's technical, I explain it. But I give, to my knowledge, I'm one of the, maybe the only one that gives exact quotes out of the medical textbooks. And I've had doctors even try to show me wrong and would give it to their students, because they were professors too, and say, find where this guy's wrong. And they went to the medical library and checked every reference I had. And they'd come back and go, 2 of them did it. Nothing was wrong. I was shocked. So they took a long time to write those, but PEO Solutions, very, very current. It's current as of 2015. And of course, nothing changes. Biochemistry and physiology is absolutely rock on. Good question. Yeah.
Is there anything that's being done or being looked at to counteract the impact of these vaccines?
That's an excellent question. The question I have, and what's a real concern, is what will they do? Very good job of what's here right now, but it's called unintended consequences. So if you have antibodies for this one, and you have a vaccine that's having you make an excess amount of specific antibodies for COVID-19, what happens when I get a big variant or something different? I could make the theoretical case that there's a possibility that you've trained your body to overcompensate for this, and now it's going to be impaired getting the new one. I don't know. Remember I told you I'm obligated to say I don't know? Nobody's done the test. So I don't know what the heck is going to happen come fall to May of next year. For the RNA one, which is the genetic modification, it's the same kind of thing. They've made it where they've geared up the response to COVID-19 because it's there and it's not going to keep coming. You already have it, or you don't have it. But I think everybody's been exposed to this by now. It's been around for a year, so the exposure is there. And if you don't have a problem, they're making the response higher, so you're going to have more response against it. But again, what happens when something new comes along? Are you going to have a hyper response? Remember that cytokine storm? I don't know, and I've seen nobody address. But I've heard even a Nobel Prize winner, virologist that specializes in virus, terrified. There was a guy from Japan, and there was another one in America, both terrified that you can hyper response. And that's why I'm saying, if you don't have these oils in PGE1 throttling that down, potential devastation. And again, I hope I'm wrong, but there's no downside to protecting yourself. That's the great thing with this. There's not even 0.1% downside. There's none. So there's no downside. And for 6 months, you'd be a fool not to be taking this to protect yourself in case there is a problem. They don't know. It's not addressed. It's called an unintended consequence. And that happens all the time. That's like with statins. The unintended consequence is I'm getting rid of the good PEOs too. Your body needs them. I don't know what they'd say. Yeah, but we're getting rid of the bad ones. I don't know how to separate them. And you can't, because that's what pharma does. It just gets rid of everything or blocks everything. It's not selective. Good question. I am very, very concerned about devastation come fall.
Hi, I was just wondering 2 things, as far as if the keto diet is fine and okay, and also inflammation and how to thus get rid of inflammation.
Okay, first, keto diet, is that good? If you don't know, the keto diet is very, very low carbs, a lot of fat, and protein is third. It's much better than a high carb diet. I think it's too extreme. Nobody can stay on it. So that's number one. You have to have something people can stay on. And the fat that they're having you eat, and I've told the people this and they don't care, they're not addressing the parent essential oils and what your body can't make. They're having you live on a pile of saturated fat or monounsaturated fat like olive oil, and your body can make that. Coconut oil be the saturated fat that's in everywhere, that's in the bullet coffee, and and it's okay to fry in, but you don't need it, because when you start putting overdoses of this down that delta-6 pathway too, it's screwing that up. So these people don't understand things the way they need to before they tell you what to do. So long-term keto people are going to have big problems. You're going to see huge cancer rates, heart disease rates, and they're not going to understand it at all because they're not eating the carbs. So it's much better, but it's insufficient. For inflammation, the parent omega-6 with the GLA Best thing in the world. And it's fast. It starts shutting down that inflammation fast. Very good question.
You recommend people get the COVID vaccine?
It's a good question. I don't want to give my personal views on it because I really don't want people following just what I say because I say it. I want you to think about it for yourself.
What about all the stuff that's on the internet about the bad things?
Yeah, you got to be careful what's on the internet because they make mistakes in what they say. From today, information overload, and most people don't have the filter to go, is this true or not true? Like, this is all I do. I live in the medical journals. I live in the medical textbooks. If you're not doing that, and virtually nobody else is, unless you're even a professor of biochemistry doesn't do this, because I've debated professors of biochemistry and they don't give any. They just give this study and that study, so that nobody knows this stuff. You got to be very, very careful because it all comes in and it looks like it could all be right. I don't trust most of it. But what you need to look at if you're looking at the internet, is this happening to a big population? You know, or are they getting this? But with the vaccines, all I can tell you is they haven't been out long enough. This is why it's under emergency use and doesn't have the full blessing of the FDA, because it hasn't been out for at least one season. I mean, I'd want 2 or 3 because things don't happen after 1 or 2 years. Could be 5 years out, but at least 1. So this season is going to tell the full story. Like I say, between December and May, it's either going to be the standard deal like the regular flu, which would mean 60,000 Americans will die. That's how many die, by the way, with the regular flu. It's 60K. It's not 0. It's a lot. And it's either going to be that or it's going to be enormous. So it's either going to be hundreds of thousands. And again, hopefully it's not, and I'm wrong, but my concern is there and it's shared by top virologists. When you have a Nobel Prize winner putting his reputation on the line saying, be very careful, that takes guts because their career is gone. And that just doesn't happen. That's why you typically get retired physicians talking about this stuff. You won't get any active one because in Canada, they'll pull their license. I've known doctors, they pulled their license, temporarily suspended it. You said something against the standard stuff, like don't use a mask. You're not practicing medicine anymore. Yeah, but it's known masks are worthless and they have a big negative. Doesn't matter. So it's very politicized, and even with the medicine and science, it's political science. Don't think for a second any scientist gets published. They don't. It has to be touting what the standard consensus is, and most of it's just wrong. Most of it's just wrong. Very good question. So whatever you choose to do, make sure you get these oils, the minerals, and the herbal. And what I can say is you will have the maximum protection for your immune system against anything. If you gave me $1 million, I wouldn't know how to make it better. That's the best I can say. And my job is making the best it can possibly be. Now we're doing something for people that have diseases in the future, but that's specific diseases. And for the average person that doesn't have that, this is as good as it gets and as good as anybody needs. They don't need to be spending the money on that. Question? Yeah, no?
Oh, can you address hydrochloric acid in women after decreasing after the age of 40?
You mean the stomach acid decreases?
Yeah.
No, I didn't know that happened. Why? Question is, why is hydrochloric acid in women, or what do you do about it, decreasing after 40 or 50? Why the heck would that happen? Now, I'll tell you one reason why it can happen. This happens in the elderly a lot, 80, 90. Salt restriction. Where do you think the Cl comes from? Hydrochloric, chloric, chloride, acid comes from? The salt. So if you're taking away the salt, they can't make hydrochloric acid. And by the way, acid reflux, it's not too much hydrochloric acid. It's the exact opposite. It's too little. Unintuitive, you want to guess that. except when experiments were done and they gave more to people, and I started talking to some doctors that did this, it's gone. So if you have acid reflux or indigestion, two things: minimize the carbs and more hydrochloric acid. So you take things that are acidic. It's never what you think. Some of this is very counterintuitive. It's like a lemon juice, you would say, is acidic. And it is, if you measure it on a pH meter. But when it goes into the body, that's gone. So what you give to cancer patients, they'll say, is lemon juice to stabilize the blood pH. So it's not obvious at all, but there's a chemical reaction that goes in there that gets rid of the acid. But by itself, it's acidic. But it turns out that it's more basic, the opposite, when it gets in the body. This isn't simple stuff, and it is not obvious. And that's why virtually nobody gets it right. They may get a little right, but then they start talking about what they don't know. And what I tell people is I know very little, but in that little is a lot. Outside of that, I don't talk about it because I don't know it. But I didn't know there's no reason for any decrease in hydrochloric acid production in women, unless they're restricting the salt too, like they're being told. Don't want to do it.
There's this, it's a fad, I think, but your opinion on apple cider vinegar.
Yeah, I see this all over the place. There's probably nothing wrong with it. I don't know what metabolic pathway there is that gives it this miraculous stuff. I know there's TV ads, and the way they sell this stuff is it's like a given. We all know that this does this. Well, I don't know that. Why the heck's it do it? They don't get into it. It's just a given. We all know. I don't know. I mean, I'll use it for salad dressing because of the taste, but in and of itself, I have no idea why it would be doing anything spectacular. There's nothing wrong with it, but I wouldn't be gulping it down by itself thinking it's going to help me.
pH balance?
Your pH balance in the bloodstream, you can't change it. This is another misconception. Acid base and alkaline water and all this stuff. Your blood, I think it's between 0.2 is all it can vary for pH. It's very close. It's like 7.35 to 7.45. It's very, very close to neutral pH. You can't change it. Your body has buffering systems. So if you eat this stuff that's highly acidic, one thing is your urine changes all over the place. So if you measure the pH of that, it's acid one day, alkaline the next. Well, something has to vary to make the bloodstream constant. So all your blood is constant. Your tissues are constant. Nature isn't so stupid to go, hey, she thinks she knows what she's doing. We can change our entire set point because she's eating this stuff. Won't let you do it. It's called the blood buffering system. You can look that up, and medical references will come out with how you're doing it. So baking soda is tied to it, but sodium bicarbonate reaction is what it is. And it just keeps it constant. You can't do it. So this eating right for your blood type and blood pH eating is more nonsense. Good questions. So take a look at those books. I'm real big on people understanding what they're doing as opposed to just saying, go and do this. I want you understanding it for itself. And these are the best books in the world, science-based, with 24-hour diet. If you care about weight and diabetes, that's the number one reason it was written. They're completely consistent, but the focus is just different the way the writing is. The other one is disease. So I'd say get them both, but if you have the money for one, pick which one. But get one of them and read that science and make it your own. So if somebody asks you, you can tell them why. Then you'll understand it. Thanks much. I appreciate your time. And take a look. Thank you. Where's on off? Thank you very much. It's on off here.
Thanks again.
Sure. Here, I think I'm muted. Is it off? How do you shut it?